Hello everyone, we're working on a 1993 Mercury Capri XR2. This is my daily driver. I am replacing the timing belt, water pump, and a few little other odds and ends like air filter. We're doing some suspension. I'll make a video about the rear trailing arms when I find out how to do it properly. I've had a lot of trouble with that. What I've also had a lot of trouble with is this water pump. I've been through two of these in the last few weeks. Why is that? Well, the first thing that happened was these retaining bolts stripped out. They're OEM bolts stripped. I'm not sure why. I think they were just made of cheese or something. The length is very critical for these. So these worked. I was able to pick them up at AutoZone, and I assume your other local retailers would be able to do that. What was really tricky was this flange. This is the water pump outlet, and I've been through several iterations of this. You have to have the engine jacked up, one of the motor mounts removed, power steering pump out of the way, all the belts off, and what I found is to have all the covers and the timing belt off to be able to install this. I think that's out of order with the full service manual seen up there. Let's go through it step by step. So to reinstall this, assuming that you're able to pull it off, something that I did not notice or had a lot of trouble with is there is a hard pipe right here that runs underneath the exhaust manifold. This is the heater core bypass. It runs into the water pump outlet over here, and it's held in by an O-ring, and that's all it is. After 30 years or so, those turn hard as steel. They are very difficult to pull out, so you have to be ginger because this hard pipe, you don't want to bend it. I'm not interested in removing all that exhaust manifold, so I was just very careful, wiggled the outlet off, held this in. I think I used vice grips or channel locks, and just gently pulled it out and just suggested. So once I got that all apart, got it all cleaned, installed the first water pump, stripped bolts, always an angry time. Got new bolts, great, found some that were the same length as OEM, reinstalled everything, and I had a leak. That's why I have the pressure tester, so I could see where the leak's coming from. This was a $300 rental from Advanced Auto. I will show you, if I can find it, what happened to the old water pump. Here we go. So right here, well, not the old water pump, but the old new water pump had some issues. These 4 bolts went in just fine. The idler and the tensioner also went in very well after I got the new bolts that don't strip at like 14 foot-pounds of torque. It's not much. The issue was where that water pump outlet, the thing that attaches to here, this flange, the problem was where the bolts run into the edge of this casting right here. They need to be a certain depth. The old bolts, I can't find them anymore. I might have tossed them out, had a slight chamfer to it. The AutoZone bolts that I bought do not. They are fully threaded, and they just crashed right into here, and they destroyed the threads. Not a lot, but just enough to make that water pump outlet fall off and cause a slight leak. Horrible mess. So what I ended up doing was getting 2 25mm bolts, 25mm long, M8 by 1.00 thread by 25mm long. So we're going to pressure test that momentarily. The other thing that I had some trouble with was finding a new lower radiator hose. I think this is one off a Mazda 323 86 turbo. It was about an inch longer than it needed to be, so I ended up cutting that off, and then I snaked that down into that tubing mess. that was the least of the problems. Someone more creative than me can make a custom hose. I don't feel that comfortable with that, especially because the turbo's right here. It's generating all kinds of heat. Even with the shrouds, I want something that's designed for a turbo car. Maybe there's no difference, but might as well at this point. Another thing that I ran into was this spring. I had to look up the part number for it. This was out of spec. This is the tensioner spring that locks onto the tensioner and pulls the timing belt in and gives your timing system tension. Now, not sure where that bag went. I'll have to dig around. There we go. The spring I ended up buying was an OEM spring. In the manual, they do have a spec for that spring. I can't remember, but if it's as old as my car, like all Capris are, 30-ish years old, they're all going to be out of tension. Even if it's been sitting, even if it's babied, even if it's very low mileage like this car. This is the part number that I got. E4376L273A. And it seems like it's pretty close. I think it might be slightly shorter. I can't tell because it's so old. But it seems to work okay. At least when I had the engine running and gushing water onto my floor. Alrighty, so we are up to roughly 17 pounds, which is 1 pound over what this pops at. I've had this fall off before, but I think it's because I just didn't have it tightened. We have no leaks. None that I can tell. It's a little wet from before when I was taking it apart, but last time it was just absolutely gushing out of this, out around there. It was terrible. It was not drivable. So this is great news. Not sure if I am going to leave this overnight, maybe take a breather. It's getting kind of late, and I'm not too worried about doing the timing belt part. Since I've done it twice now, it's not so bad. Some other things to say. You'd want to make sure that these lines are lined up with this timing cover. If you could see that right here and here where I put a little blue mark, and the same thing over here. They like to tilt back. There's lots of great Miata videos on this, since this is essentially a Miata engine that's been turbocharged. You can use a 14mm wrench and just move it over a tooth. It's a little bit of a juggling act to tension everything, get the timing belt run, and hold it in place. It's not so bad after you've been through a few. I've also moved this over to the side, the intake or the outlet from the turbo into the intake runners and the throttle body to gain a little bit of extra clearance. I've also, if I didn't talk about this earlier, I bought a set of these wrenches. This is the only one that I have that's this long. I wish all of them were, because it'd make working on this much easier, but I'm on a budget and I hate buying tools just to do one project. I'm looking at you, Shot Press. Anyway, pretty good evening, guys. Thanks for sticking around. One last thing I forgot to mention, I ran a tap through these holes, all two of them, to make sure that the bolt goes in smooth, because this is an absolute pain to get to. Make sure you run the tap through it, even if it's through a reputable supplier. I'm using a Continental pump, so be careful.